Orang kat luar tak nampak. Yang mana? Kat luar tak ada orang. Kan orang tanya. Yang baru keluar ni boleh tukar. Yang ni ya, memang punya juga. Tapi kita rekod. Oh.
Siapa yang buat perempuan tu ni? Ni.
Singapore talent tu. Ni live now kan?
Ni yang dari kau tadi tu.
Baik.
Yang ini, yang aku pinjam tadi, dia pergi ke sini, yang ini dekat sini. Kenapa?
Kalau kau split kan tukar dia tak boleh tarik-tarik.
Macam mana nampak dia? Yang ini, yang kau nampak ni dekat sini. Yang kau nampak ni dekat sini tadi. Dia jadi terbalik macam tu.
Tak ada ni. Hei. Asal gambar dia sini?
Oh, dia spot ni. Ni, dia spot kat sini. Yang ni, this presenting. Ni spot, presenting view and slideshow. Tapi kenapa dia display di sini?
DSD tadi. Ni sini.
Tarik lagi dekat ni.
Ya, biar.
Ya. Finger nak sama.
Tak.
Oh, bukan ni.
Tolong ya. Nak ambil.
Oh, itu.
Tak ada.
Betul. Jadi makan tu kan? Ya?
Bukan kuih dalam bentuk ni.
Mana?
Bentuk kedua. Oh, boleh macam ni. Ini go back, go off dulu. Tak boleh off.
Sebab dah live. It's on.
Nak dekat, jangan dekat sini. Nanti orang mau masuk tengah. Mat ke?
Cuba slowkan dulu benda ni. Mat. Tak apa mata. Jadi lambat. Test. Ni, tak ada pun.
Berat tau.
Test.
Dia tak bunyi tu dari mana? Dia bising aku tak tahu ni.
Tu lambat. Kau masuk lambat. Kau tunggu je lagi. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Ada volume macam ni. Boleh set dengan volume. Ni. Audio level insert mic ni. Aku cuba kau ajar ni. Kosong.
Kau tak dengar pula suara dia ke?
Kan? Taklah ni. Kau tengok kau letakkan ke slow tadi.
Tak. Cabut ni tadi. Kuat pula bunyi dia.
Ya. Mama tak payah buat live kata bang. Memang busy. Macam mana nak buat ni?
Itu tutup
Ha,
Tutup.
dah tunggu lah dulu.
tak payah buat live katanya.
Ni nak talk apa? Talk sorang-sorang talk orang kursi kayu apa? Tak jumpa siapa boy. Kita sebelah-sebelah.
Ya? Ni lah. Sebab tengah buat live YouTube. Lepas tu dia bunyi kat situ tau, tangkap kat mana. Macam tangkap kat sini kot.
Boleh dapat link dia?
Ha? Link dia.
Kita orang dapat link juga.
Mai, apa link dia, Mai? Kau tengok situ. Masuk dekat APIUM. Tu ah.
Oh ni.
Tu link dia. Mana nak tolak apa? Orang datang PP ni, saya ambil datang. Menteri tu. Kami kan kau tahu Sabi datang tu. Dari mana dah aku tak tahu. Aku tak tahu. Takkan orang pernah dapat peralihan. Aku tak sampai lagi. Aku tak tahu. Ni dia kata tanya aku. Cakap dia kata ini sebetulnya ni. Cakap tak tahu. Kau ni fikir aku kecoh lagi. Sebab dia cerita tu memang selalu guna. Esok pun guna. Betul tak esok? Lepas tu terpacak pada tengah tu tadi. Ini kan alamak. Ini. Tak buka ada yang buka. Macam saya pergi buka tadi. Hello? Biarlah. Okay. Terus kau mengajar tak kat situ okay. Pusing kan ni. Apa yang aku layan ni?
Are you coming with the sound?
No, I think Khalid or Syed, one of them came up.
I see.
Because I'm here in Subang, so go all the way from court. Suicidal lah. Friday morning lagi.
Yes.
Kopi ni kan? Tak, kopi ni cuba buka. Buka kat sini. Yang bodoh tu boleh buka. Kopi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Datuk Seri Syed Albar, kedutaan kita pada pagi ini, Dr. Roslan, saudara Muslim Imran, Prof Madya Dr. Hafidzi, sesau tak kasih. Terima kasih kerana sudi datang pada pagi ini. Selamat datang ke Akademi Islam juga Hafidzi Islam. Kita mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Akademi Pendidikan Islam kerana sudi untuk bekerjasama dengan BDS Malaysia dan juga Palestine Research Group untuk menganjurkan program deklarasi Balfour, latar belakang dan implikasinya. Sedikit berkenaan dengan BDS Malaysia. BDS Malaysia adalah satu organisasi yang merupakan sebahagian daripada gerakan antarabangsa yang mengajak seluruh masyarakat dunia untuk memboikot Israel dan mana-mana organisasi yang bekerjasama dengan Israel dalam melakukan kezaliman terhadap Israel. Dan kami telah pun bekerja selama lebih 2 tahun sekarang ini untuk mengajak masyarakat Malaysia. InsyaAllah akan kami ceritakan lepas ini tentang apakah syarikat-syarikat dan sebagainya yang patut kita beri tekanan untuk berhenti menyokong kezaliman Israel terhadap Palestin. Tapi pada pagi ini kita akan memberi fokus berkenaan dengan the Balfour Declaration-Background dan implication. Dan kita bernasib baik kerana kita mempunyai kita akan mendengar dengan 4 orang pakar yang sangat mengetahui tentang konflik dan sejarah konflik Palestin-Israel ini. Rasanya kita sangat bernasib baik kerana kita ada bersama kita Seri, Datuk Seri Syed Hamid Albar yang merupakan ahli kabinet yang lama dalam kerajaan Malaysia, juga pernah menjawab jawatan Foreign Affairs Minister di luar Malaysia yang oleh itu sangat berpengalaman dan juga mempunyai banyak ilmu yang boleh dia kongsikan dengan kita nanti berkenaan dengan isu Palestin dan juga Timur Tengah secara amnya. Jadi sebelum itu, before we proceed with the panel discussion, we are also very lucky to have with us Mr. Sao Takahashi, who is going to give an address or a lecture to us about what is actually happening in Palestine at the moment, all the injustices there. Saya cakap dalam dua bahasa ya, Inggeris dan bahasa Malaysia. Mr. Sao Takahashi adalah seorang pakar dalam bidang hak asasi manusia, human rights. Beliau adalah sekarang ini adalah pegawai dalam bidang gerakan human rights antarabangsa. Dan yang paling penting sekali ialah beliau adalah dahulunya Deputy Head of Office in occupied Palestine for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Dan beliau menjawab jawatan tersebut selama 5 tahun dan sangat peka tentang kezaliman yang berlaku di sana yang dilakukan oleh Israel terhadap rakyat Palestin. Jikalau tuan-tuan atau puan-puan berminat untuk mengetahui tentang beliau, boleh Google dan akan dapati satu artikel yang there's an article in Jerusalem Post about Saul, where the Israeli lobby or the Israeli supporters are very angry at Mr. Sao Takahashi because his reform was very damning, very critical of what is happening over there. Especially he described, beliau telah menceritakan tentang kezaliman settlers ataupun settlement bahasa Malaysia adalah penempatan. Settlers adalah orang Israel yang duduk di penempatan haram di sana yang membunuh dan merampas tanah-tanah orang Palestin. Beliau membuat laporan tersebut dan oleh kerana itu beliau telah dikutuk. Jadi beliau terpaksa berhati-hati tentang apa yang beliau tulis. Tapi sekarang ini, at the moment, Mr. Sao is already no longer attached to the United Nations office, and therefore he is free to talk about what is happening over there, and he's going to share with us what is happening over there. Mr. Sao Takahashi memiliki ijazah LLM ataupun Masters in International Law, in International Human Rights daripada University of Essex. Dia juga mempunyai diploma in Refugee Studies daripada Refugee Studies Program Oxford University, dan beliau mempunyai jawatan dalam bidang BA in Western Philosophy daripada Waseda University in Tokyo. Without further ado, can I invite Mr. Saul Takahashi to give his presentation. Where is he? He's over there. Sorry, Mr. Saul. Please.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm not sure what I should do with PowerPoint presentation today. Bring that.
No, I will control it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sorry about that. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come today, and very much want to thank the panelists and, of course, PDS Malaysia for organizing this entire conference. The professor has already said most of what I want to say about myself and introducing myself. I used to be Deputy Head of Office for the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. That's the UN Human Rights Agency. I was in occupied Palestine for 5 years, from 2009 March to 2014 end of May. And like the professor has already said, I have left the UN, so I am completely free. Thank you. Yes, I am completely free to say whatever I want and to call a spade a spade. Perhaps some of you have encountered people who have been in the UN for a very long time, and they left the UN, they've retired, but they still are in the habit of being a UN civil servant and always beating around the bush and never saying things directly. I have the opposite issue. I always have to be a little bit of, I always have to tell you up front that I'm not like that. I'm very direct and I call a spade a spade. So I'm looking forward to being very open as to what's happening in occupied Palestine right now. The Jerusalem Post article that the professor referred to is already here. I usually include it in my presentations just to give people an idea or to prove to people that I'm not going to shy away from saying what I feel, the reality of what happened, what's going on in Palestine. I'll try to be very brief, or at least as quick as possible. I tend to go on when we start talking about Palestine. It's a subject that is complicated, and there are many different faces of it. And of course, it's the injustice is so severe, the situation is so bad, and the Palestinian people are the subject of such persecution that it's very difficult to talk about this without getting emotional and without going on as to what is going on in the world. So please bear with me. As a UN civil servant, like I mentioned, there are a number of things that we were never allowed to say. I don't want to go on too much about that, but of course, start off with the first letter of the alphabet. A. One word that we always had to avoid was the A word, namely apartheid. And of course, perhaps many of you will know that in March, a different branch of the UN published a very long report detailing how Israeli practices towards Palestinians amount to apartheid. And this was the head of the Economic Commission of Southwest Asia. This is the head of that agency at the time, and she was quickly fired by the head of the UN. That really sums it all up. In the UN, we always have to be very, very careful and shy away from using those kind of words like apartheid. I mean, the touchstone, the guiding principles of the UN are international law. And because we were the Human Rights Agency, we use as our reference point international human rights conventions. So the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the Children's Rights Convention, all these conventions. And of course, Israel has a lot to answer under these as well. But there's also, lo and behold, an International Human Rights Convention outlawing apartheid. It's there, right there, for the whole world to see. If you look it up on Google, you will find it instantly. And there's a long definition as to what constitutes apartheid under international law. And I can tell you what's happening, what the Israelis are doing in Palestine fits the bill completely. So there's the question of is Israel an apartheid state? is what is going on in Palestine, does it amount to apartheid? I mean, this is kind of a joke. I mean, of course it's apartheid. I mean, there's absolutely no question. All you have to do is look at the international definition and you will see. And I will also note that when I say Israeli practices amount to apartheid, it's not just in what the international community at large recognizes as occupied Palestine, so the West Bank and Gaza. I'm also referring to Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship in what is recognized as Israel proper now, 48 Palestinians. They also live under a system of apartheid, as well, and this report pointed this out very well too, as well as Palestinians who live abroad, Palestinian refugees. You know, any person who has one Jewish grandparent living anywhere in the world, United States, France, anywhere, Malaysia, they can raise their hands, and within a couple of weeks, they will be on a flight to Tel Aviv, and they will be given Israeli citizenship, and they will be given tax breaks to live anywhere they want. Any Palestinian who had been, you know, who can prove that they were living in even what is now Israel up to 48, and they were driven out by Israeli forces, they have basically no chance of returning. So this is also one of the many apartheid practices that are taking place right now. I'll get into that. I don't have too much time, or I don't have the time to talk too much about the 48 Palestinians, but it's worth pointing out that this is not just about what the UN recognizes as occupied territories. This is very much an apartheid system where different laws apply to you, apply to different races. I can't go through every single letter of the alphabet, but I'll go through one more about the C word, namely colonies. There are Israeli settlements throughout the West Bank, and that includes East Jerusalem. They are populated right now with more than 600,000 Israelis, 600,000 settlers. Now, every single one of those settlements is built on stolen Palestinian land. I mean, every single one. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Every single one is illegal under international law. This is, you know, this has to be stressed. And of course, the UN and the Human Rights Agency of the UN makes, you know, we make this point very strenuously, repeated all the time. But again, it's the C word. These were settlements, and people living there were settlers. It was never the C word, colonies. The people living there were settlers. They were not colonialists, colonizers. The UN criticizes this policy day in, day out, and it's important to do that. But we were very, it was very clear that we had to avoid calling a spade a spade. These are colonies, that's what they are. When you say the word settlement, this sort of gives the impression that, you know, people came and there were no people living on the land and, you know, they built a village. That's not how this is. These are colonies. And these are very much, you know, big cities with banks, with schools, with apartment blocks, with pools, and every, you know, all the sort of bells and whistles of any big city, anywhere. So, you know, again, this is just another thing that we had to avoid in the UN, which I will not avoid now. And of course, God forbid, this is the last time, this is the last alphabet word I'm going to use. God forbid that we use the J word, of course, Jewish. You know, these were populated by Israeli settlers. They were not colonizers, and they were not Jews. But that's the funny thing. You know, the funny thing is, these are Jewish settlements. These are colonies of Jews that the Israeli government has made all over occupied Palestine, and is colonizing with Jewish people. You know, there's no sort of bones about this. The Israelis themselves are very, very clear. They are trying to Judaize Palestine, what they call Judea and Samaria, that's the West Bank. They're trying to increase the population of Jews in Jerusalem. You know, they say this very, very openly. There's no sort of beating around the bush. That's not what Israelis do. So it's kind of funny that in many ways, you know, in the UN, we had to be more cautious than the Israeli government itself was. We had to be more scared of saying the truth than the Israelis themselves. The Israelis literally come out, oh yeah, these are for Jews. These are Jew-only cities. These are cities that we built for Jews, and Jews are going to go live there. Doesn't matter if they're from the United States or France. Any Jew can come to Israel and live in one of these Jew-only cities. Very, very clear. But that's not the message that the UN gives, and that's not the message that I think a lot of people see in the international media. So, that's just one of the problems with the way the situation is portrayed internationally. It's a very sanitized version that I think a lot of us see. This is another photograph of one of the colonies. Now, I want to sort of take a step back and talk more about the situation in general. I think a lot of people abroad only really, they really only think about the situation in Palestine when there is a quote-unquote war in Gaza. These are from the last military offensive in 2014. There's a major military Israeli offensive, usually once every 2 years or so, up till now, in Gaza. And of course, these offensives are horrible. One thing I very much want to take issue with, and which I want to convey to you, is that these are not wars. These are massacres. A war under international law, or an armed conflict under international law, has certain things. There are certain definitions. And yes, there is an armed conflict going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and this is a situation of occupation. And yes, technically it is a situation of armed conflict. But when people use the term war, the image that I think a lot of people get, or the image that is portrayed, is one of two countries that have sort of equal power. Two countries that have armies and tanks and guns and fighter planes, and the two armies meet in some kind of neutral area around the border, no man's land, right around there. And there's some sort of there's sort of like equality between the two parties. There's a parity. But that's not the situation at all in Palestine, and that's what I want to stress. The situation in Palestine is occupation. It is not, it is not a situation where you have two parties that have equal power. The Israelis have, overwhelming military, political, and economic might. The Israelis have all the weapons you can imagine, all the weapons, all the fancy fighter planes, all the fancy stuff that all the the Americans and Europeans give them. The Palestinians basically have nothing. And when these kind of military offensives take place in Gaza, to call it a war as if somehow you have two equal sides and, both sides are doing bad things, so, I guess we sort of have to be neutral and not really blame either one. That's really not what the situation is. The situation is just one side bashing the other with complete impunity, and that comes out in the casualties. In the 2014 military offensive, we were looking at about 2,300 Palestinians killed. This was in a space of about 3 weeks. That includes over 550 children and over 10,000 injured. Now, the UN says that almost 70% of the people who were killed and injured in the 2014 offensive were civilians. The Israelis dispute that. They have a very sort of fierce reaction to that, and they say, no, the figure is more close to about half. So about half the people who were killed were civilians. Now, as an international lawyer, we can talk about international law until the day is done, but for the Israelis to come out and say, no, it's not 70%, come on, we're not that bad, it's only about half. For them to come out and say this, and for no other country to call them out on this, is, frankly, it's obscene. I mean, to say that somehow, we only killed, only half the people killed were civilians, so we're okay. We're a democratic country, and we didn't do anything wrong. I mean, this is an insult to the intelligence. This is nonsense. But that is really how these things are portrayed, the narrative that's created in the media. The amount of Israeli casualties were something like 66 up to 70. The vast majority of which were soldiers. And that's a very, very important distinction. Because when you have a conflict, when you have a shootout, when you're a soldier, that's what you do. This is your job. You go in, and if you mess up, you're killed. And that's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. Killing a soldier in a time of conflict is a legitimate act of war. This is not terrorism. There's nothing wrong with this. This is what war is. Armed conflict means killing soldiers. But armed conflict also means that you have to avoid killing civilians as much as you can. And that's something that the Israelis simply didn't do. These military offensives are hotbeds of war crimes that are committed by the Israelis. Intentional targeting of civilians, intentional targeting of civilian facilities like mosques, like hospitals, intentional targeting of UN schools. I could go on and on. But one thing that I want to stress very much is, we have these military offensives once every 2 years, and everybody looks, and it's all over the media. I know it's so terrible what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine. And then the offensive is called off, and there's sort of like a ceasefire. And then I think a lot of people have the impression that, okay, now there's no more shooting in Gaza, so everything is fine, and people get back to their daily lives, and peace is returned to Gaza. And nothing could be further from the truth. Palestinians live under a brutal apartheid regime, and Gaza under a near total Israeli siege. Basically, nobody goes out, and nothing goes out, and certainly almost nothing comes in. Most of these houses which you see that were destroyed by the Israelis have not been rebuilt, because the Israelis placed very, very severe restrictions on construction materials being brought into Gaza. So, the entire area of Gaza is under complete blockade. There is no peace, first and foremost. I mean, Israelis come in and they send fighter planes and assassinate people. They shoot people right across the border. This kind of thing is very commonplace as well. The unemployment rate in Gaza is the highest in the world. It's over 40%. Over 80% of the population relies on UN food aid. And there's no clean drinking water. There are only about 3 or 4 hours of electricity a day. Nobody knows when those 3 or 4 hours will be. I could go on and on. Basically, the UN has said already that at the latest, by 2020, Gaza will be uninhabitable. I mean, people will not be able to live there. That is how terrible the situation is in Gaza. And this is completely because of the Israeli blockade. This is because of the Israeli policies against Gaza. Now, all the situation, this is more photographs of Gaza and the blockade. Now, the situation in the West Bank is slightly better in terms of living conditions, but the fact still remains that the rights of Palestinians in the West Bank, and I'm also including East Jerusalem, of course, are violated really at every stage of their lives. It's a systematic violation of rights that takes place every day. I'll just show you these pictures of East Jerusalem, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, or Jerusalem. Let's look at West Jerusalem. This is basically the Jewish side of town. Now you can see this is really much like any kind of, like a European country, like a southern European country, and that's really the standard of living there. That's how West Jerusalem. Now this is East Jerusalem. Now you can instantly spot the difference. It doesn't take a genius to see this, and to see just how different the two groups are treated. The Israelis have illegally announced that that East Jerusalem is also part of their city. They have illegally annexed East Jerusalem. No country in the world recognizes this, by the way. But to them, the entire city is just one Jerusalem, their eternal undivided capital. So these residents of East Jerusalem that you see, they pay the same taxes. They are forced to pay the same taxes as the Jewish residents. An Israeli NGO has actually gone through all the books and figured out that basically the Palestinian residents amount to about 1/3 of the people in Jerusalem. So that amounts to about 1/3 of the tax base. However, only about 10% of the budget of Jerusalem is spent in the Palestinian areas. So basically, the Palestinians are forced to pay taxes which are used, which are basically stolen and used in the Jewish areas. Look at this. In many times of the year, there's no traffic, there's no garbage collection. I mean, this is how bad it is. This is how bad the public services are. In the summer, this starts smelling, and the Palestinians have no choice but to burn their garbage. It's a very, very bad situation. I'm not even going to go into the schools and other public services. It's just a very easy to see explanation. And of course, it's completely different from what happens on the Jewish side, where there is garbage collection 3 or 4 times a week, like one would expect. Water is also a big thing in the whole situation. There is one absolute surefire way to spot a Palestinian home in the West Bank, or also in Israel proper. Of course, Palestinians are basically forced to live in particular neighborhoods, but even like from the sky you can tell. Because if you look at these black things on the top of these homes, these are water tanks. Palestinian homes are not connected to the water grid by the Israelis. A lot of the water is taken from the Jordan Valley, which is in fact part of Palestine. It is stolen basically by the Israelis. It is used in these colonies, and these are some of the pictures of the very nice living standards they have in the colonies. And if anything is left over, then they sell it to the Palestinians at a very high marked price. So that's what these water tanks are. They're water tanks. The Palestinians are forced to buy them from the Israeli water company. If you go to some of the poorer villages deep in the West Bank, in the summer months, some of them have to spend up to 20% of their income on water. And, you know, again, to repeat, this is Palestinian water, which the Israelis are just basically stealing and using for their own benefit. Besides water, land is, of course, another important natural resource, and this is very key. Because at the end of the day, I would say that this is really about natural resources, and in particular about land. The Israelis have been quite successful at painting this entire thing as about religion, and that somehow, you know, Muslims hate Jews, and they've hated Jews for centuries, and, you know, they have this obsessive hatred of Jews, and they're going to destroy us the first chance, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody who has any knowledge of the history of this region, of course, can see through that in what I would say a nanosecond. But they've been very successful at painting this picture, I would say, in the international media. There are a lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans, a lot of Japanese who are duped by this whole idea. The colonization of the land is really at the heart of the Zionist project. This is really what Israel is about. And this is what is taking place throughout Palestine, Judaization of Jerusalem, and in the Jewish colonization of Palestinians everywhere. You can go to the web and find this. This is basically an advert for Jews living abroad to raise their hands and say they want to become Israeli citizens and live in these, you know, really nice cities that have all the water and all the electricity that you want. And you know, this is a colony in the deep heart of the West Bank. You won't find that written on this website. This is in the Judean desert, the Shamar region. Yeah, this is in the north of the West Bank. So, you know, this is the Israeli government and all these Israeli public bodies have been going full out for decades to colonize the West Bank, colonize Palestine with Jews from all over the world. There's no dispute about this. You know, if you're an Israeli citizen, if you live in one of the colonies, you get all these fancy bells and whistles. Like you have tax breaks. You can buy a home with a tax-free mortgage. In some of the settlements, in some of the colonies, I said it myself, in some of the colonies you can buy a second car tax-free. You get a loan for your car tax-free. The schools are better in the colonies because there are all these subsidies for the schools. So they get better teachers, there are fewer kids per class, you know, this kind of thing. This kind of thing that's very attractive to, for example, young couples with, you know, who are a little bit sick of paying too much for their home in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And look, and lo and behold, this is the new frontier. And it's a little bit far away, but, you know, you can go and live there and have a really nice and happy life. I already told you that over 600,000 Israelis live in these colonies. Now, not too many people have done this math, I'm not really sure why, but the entire population, Jewish population of Israel, looking aside from 48,000, is about 6-7 million. So, what we are looking at is 1 in 10, 1 in 11 Jews with Israeli passports live in these colonies. You know, this is not like an isolated thing. This is completely normal. And to most of the Israelis, they do call these settlements, but to most Israelis, these are just like cities that are a little bit far off in the countryside, you know? And the fact that these are built on stolen Palestinian land, well, most of them just, you know, they don't want to think about it, they don't want to talk about it, but that's really what this is all about. So it's very much a colonial project of sending their people and populating the land. And that's a slide of some Palestinians' homes which are being destroyed to make way for these settlements. This is the kind of thing that happens all the time. I'm already running out of time, so I'll be a little bit quick. But as you can see, the squares on the map of the West Bank are where the colonies are. Now, a lot of these are very, very far away from cities like Tel Aviv, in Israel proper. So the whole place is actually very small. I mean, it's Palestine, historical Palestine is actually very small. You can go from one end to the other in a car with about for about 3 hours, 4 hours. Will take you from one end to the other. So basically what I'm saying is, people live in the colonies, but some of them need to commute to Tel Aviv, for example. So what that means is there's this entire network of roads which has been built for the use of basically the people who live in the colonies only. We used to call these the apartheid roads. Many of these roads are completely, Palestinians are completely forbidden from using the roads, or they might be completely forbidden from crossing the roads. I think many of you have heard about the checkpoints through the West Bank and how they're all over and they're making life very, very difficult for Palestinians. It's very difficult to sort of get a sense of what that means. I think I can give you an example this is the kind of thing that happens all the time. Your father has a seizure, which means you have to drive so you want to drive him to the hospital, the clinic, which is in the next town. But you get on the road and all of a sudden Israeli soldiers are there and they've set up a checkpoint for no apparent reason. You're stopped, you're not allowed to go back. You're there, you're stopped there and they make you wait there for an hour and the father keeps on with his seizures and he dies. That's a case that I actually documented, but I documented many of these cases. This is the kind of thing which happens all the time. Going to work in the next town used to be like a 15-minute drive. Now it means you have to go around and you have to wait at checkpoints. It becomes 2 hours, 3 hours. Going to university becomes 4 hours. It's impossible to do. So basically this is making life impossible for many Palestinians throughout the West Bank. One final example I give is just a system of justice, because I'm a human rights lawyer and we're very keen on this kind of thing. I would just come out and say there is no justice in the West Bank. There is a justice system as such, a justice system which looks at it, but this is very much a prime example of the apartheid system that exists. The Israelis that live in the colonies, if they commit a crime, they're subject to normal Israeli law. They will be arrested by the Israeli police, they will be given all the sort of rights that you would expect, they will be given access to a lawyer, etc. Palestinians who live in the West Bank and who are arrested for whatever reason, they are subject to military law. So they are tried in Israeli military courts by Israeli soldiers. I have witnessed many of these court proceedings, and I can tell you it is the definition of a kangaroo court. 99% of people are found guilty. Most of them have never met their lawyer before the trial. It is all just a joke. This is a picture of a child being arrested. In fact, this is a very unusual case because children are generally arrested in the middle of the night. Israeli troops come to you in the middle of the night. They drag out your child, saying that he threw stones a few weeks ago or whatever. This is clearly not a serious charge. They would, beat him up, take him to an Israeli military prison, and generally sort of pressure him to give information on his family or other people in the village. That's basically how it works. And that's, these are just some of the examples of how the apartheid system in Palestine is violating the rights of Palestinians, left and right. When an Israeli soldier or an Israeli settler, somebody living in the colonies, when they shoot a Palestinian or commit a crime, burn their house down, this is what happens. Basically, they're treated as a hero. There are short video clips of this kind of thing. If you want to go on Google and maybe you can type in Hebron IDF killing, something like that, then you'll get the video. This guy was caught on video of shooting a defenseless Palestinian in the head. So the Palestinian was killed. Because this received such international attention, he actually was put on trial in the military system. Very, very unusual. Usually this never happens. but he was treated as a hero throughout Israel, as you can see. And Netanyahu and many other politicians have intervened, saying that he should be pardoned because he was a hero, he was defending our country or whatever. So that's the thing. One thing I would just say in closing, I guess, as an example, this is the main checkpoint that goes from Ramallah to East Jerusalem. As a human rights lawyer, we see many things. We document cases of rape, torture, and extrajudicial killings, and this is what we do. This is our job, and we talk to victims, and we see a lot of grisly stuff, and that's just the nature of our work. But you never know what's going to affect you, and quite often it's not the thing which seems the most stark or severe on the surface. This is the main checkpoint, and as you can see, there are huge traffic jams because these are people who are driving into Jerusalem from Ramallah. And a Palestinian would never be able to do this, by the way, because you cannot take your car into Jerusalem with a West Bank ID. But many of these people are generally East Jerusalem residents. Anyway, there's this huge traffic jam because all the cars are stopped, and the Israeli troops come out and open the trunk. Actually, they make you open your own trunk and open things and harass you and look at your ID. So these cars are stopping, and the checkpoint has these big speakers where the IDF people are sort of barking out orders to the cars, saying, stop at the line. Okay, come, stop at the line. It's sort of like that. And I remember this always affected me. They would be barking out these orders in Hebrew and not in Arabic. Of course, a lot of Israelis don't speak Arabic, but mostly at these checkpoints, and certainly at a big checkpoint like this, you would have several Israeli troops who speak very good Arabic. You would have Druze from the Golan Heights or whatever, and they would be fluent in Arabic. But they made a point, I felt, of not putting those people behind the speaker. They make the point of barking out these orders to Palestinians, not in their language, but in the language of the occupier. And I feel it's a stark example of what occupation is about. You have everything taken from you. You have every single human right in the book is violated, left and right. You have no access to jobs, education, nothing. Your culture is being destroyed, it's being targeted, all this kind of thing. And even your language is taken from you. And I feel that's a good example of what military occupation is about. It takes your land, it takes your rights, even your language. One of the key things that defines you as a human being is being forcibly taken from you. So that's really the situation in Palestine. I have a few slides about, or I wanted to talk a little bit about many of our favorite people. I want to talk a little bit about in the international situation, but I feel that I've already gone over my allotted time. One thing I would say is that the BDS movement, the boycott movement, is extremely important. And really nothing would change and nothing will change if we don't keep up the pressure on governments to put pressure on Israel. I can't go through all the examples of successes that the boycott movement has had, but there have been many successes, believe it or not. And one of the big successes, I would say, is a resolution in the Human Rights Council last year that created or ordered the UN to create a database of companies that are profiting from the Israeli colonization enterprise, profiting from the settlements. I showed you a photograph of the settlements. These are big cities. Every single Israeli company, that isn't like, a corner shop, has operations in the settlements. I'm not exaggerating. Every single Israeli company is there. Every single Israeli bank is in on this because they finance the building of the colonies. Every single Israeli university does work for the Israeli army. I mean, the entire Israeli economy is in on this and relies on the whole colonization enterprise. That's really what Israel is. It's just one big colonizing enterprise. So that database has been created by the UN, and they are going forward with making public the list of companies that are the bad guy companies. these are the companies that should be very high up on the list of targeting by the boycott movement. Now, as you can imagine, the Israelis are furious, and they have taken their friends, like this guy here, to try to kill this entire operation. And the pressure is really, really immense on us. But that also just goes to show how afraid the Israelis are, how they realize that this is, the writing is really on the wall. This is my prime minister, of course, and a complete avowed fascist. And I'm very direct, as you can see. And the Israelis see that they are slowly being edged out of the market. A lot of the sort of talk about boycotting by the European governments, a lot of this is lip service. The Europeans are still doing a lot of weapons deals with the Israelis. But still, the Israelis see that the political wind is blowing away from them. And so what they have been trying to do is they have been trying to open new markets. And Japan is definitely one. So what I wanted to say was how important the BDS movement is as a citizenry movement, and also as how important the role is of governments like the governments of Malaysia, the government of Malaysia, that traditionally has been supportive of the Palestinian cause. Lately we see quite a number of governments, Arab governments, that one was one of them, distancing themselves from the Palestinian cause. There are all sorts of reasons for this, and I'm not going to talk about them. But that's why we very much hope that governments like Malaysia, Pakistan, and these kind of governments that are traditionally been very supportive of Palestine remain so, and that we as citizens, continue pushing with the BDS movement so that we can bring justice to Palestine. Thank you.
Terima kasih kita ucapkan kepada Sesama Pak Hafidzi. Dia ucapkan tentang kepentingan untuk menyokong gerakan BDS dan tekanan syarikat-syarikat yang membantu Israel. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, kita kena ikut nasihat dia tadi. Sebab di dalam negara kita sendiri pun ada syarikat-syarikat yang membantu Israel yang berjihad dengan bebas. Salah satu syarikat tersebut sebagai contoh, a company which is helping Israel now installing security apparatus outside Masjid Al-Aqsa. Alat-alat yang digunakan di luar Masjid Al-Aqsa untuk mengawal orang Palestin dibekalkan oleh syarikat G4S. Syarikat itu beroperasi di Malaysia. Dia adalah pembekal utama kepada perkhidmatan keselamatan kepada bank-bank di Malaysia, termasuk pada bank Islam. Bagaimana kita boleh benarkan syarikat tersebut bergerak di sini walaupun dia adalah syarikat yang membantu kezaliman Israel? Itu menunjukkan kepentingan kita menyokong gerakan BDS. Okey, tadi kita telah mendengar apa yang berlaku sekarang ini di Palestin, tapi apa yang kita patut juga lakukanlah memahami apakah latar belakang kepada kezaliman yang berlaku di sana. Itulah fokus kita pada seterusnya, iaitu mendengar pendapat-pendapat dan kupasan oleh pakar-pakar kita dalam forum yang akan dimulakan sekejap lagi. Dan untuk itu saya menjemput saudara Khalid Jimat selaku yang akan menjadi moderator kepada forum ini, dan beliau akan memperkenalkan semua ahli-ahli panel. Khalid Jimat adalah daripada BDS Malaysia juga dan juga daripada MyCARE, dan saya serahkan mikrofon kepada saudara Khalid Jimat.
Testing. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih kepada Profesor Dr. Nazari Ismail, pengurusi BDS Malaysia. InsyaAllah kita akan adakan satu forum pada pagi ini. Sebabkan kita tak banyak masa, so saya terus jemput semua panelis kita, keempat panelis kita ke hadapan untuk mengambil tempat ke hadapan, insyaAllah. Saya jemput Tan Seri, Dr. Hafidzi, Dr. Roslan dan Muslim, insyaAllah. Silakan. Okay, insyaAllah. Saya dan semua panelis pada pagi ini akan diberikan satu tanggungjawab yang agak berat lah, sedikit, sebab kita tak banyak masa. Sebabnya hari Jumaat ada solat Jumaat nanti. Dalam tempoh sejam setengah ini, dari sekarang sampai pukul 12.30 harapnya, kita akan kupas tajuk yang macam mana dibentangkan di hadapan, The Balfour Declaration-Background and Implications, ataupun dia punya latar belakang dan implikasi. Sebab kita ada 4 panelis, saya akan bahagikan kepada 2 bahagian. So 2 orang panelis akan cover bahagian background, dua lagi panelis akan cover bahagian implication. So hopefully kita akan dapat the balance lah, view of both aspects. Sebelum saya teruskan, saya nak perkenalkan sedikit panelis kita pada pagi ini, insyaAllah. Yang pertama adalah Tan Sri Datuk Seri Syed Hamid bin Syed Albar. Syed, okey, Syed. Tan Sri Datuk Seri Syed Hamid bin Syed Albar, yang mana merupakan adalah politicians dan bekas ahli kabinet Malaysia yang telah berkhidmat hampir 20 tahun di dalam kerajaan kita. Tan Sri bermula kariernya sebagai magistrate, ya, betul, Tan Sri. Kemudian pernah juga berkhidmat di dalam bidang perbankan sebelum mencebur di bidang politik pada tahun 1990. So Tan Sri pernah menjadi Menteri Keadilan, Ministry of Justice, pernah menjadi Menteri Pertahanan, Menteri Luar Negara dan Menteri Dalam Negara. Jadi banyaklah pengalaman Tan Sri yang mungkin boleh dikongsikan kepada kita pada pagi ini, insyaAllah. Itu yang pertama. Panelis kita yang kedua adalah Profesor Madya, Dr. Roslan yang merupakan timbalan pengarah untuk bahagian penyelidikan dan pembangunan Research and Development di Akademi Islam Universiti Malaya. Ekspertis beliau dalam bidang Islamic Studies, Islamic History and Civilization dan Islamic Jerusalem Studies. Beliau banyak menerbitkan buku-buku, juga artikel dalam jurnal-jurnal antarabangsa lah. Dan saya maklum doktor juga baru saja melancarkan buku beliau 2 bulan lepas akan saya di sini, yang bertajuk The Significance of Islamic Jerusalem in Islam, yang mana saya rasa ada bukunya di luar kalau siapa ingin dapatkan. Panelis kita yang ketiga adalah Profesor Madya Dr. Hafidzi yang merupakan pensyarah di Fakulti Pertanian Universiti Putra Malaysia, juga merupakan pengerusi kepada Humanitarian Care Malaysia ataupun MyCARE. Beliau seorang yang sangat aktif menulis dan memberikan ceramah-ceramah dalam aspek sejarah, sama ada sejarah di Nusantara atau sejarah umat Islam di seluruh dunia. Dan beliau pernah ke Gaza sebanyak 2 kali dan juga merupakan penerima anugerah Mohd Rasul peringkat kebangsaan pada tahun 2015. Yang terakhir adalah Encik Muslim Imran, yang merupakan pengerusi kepada Palestinian Cultural Organization Malaysia. Beliau memiliki master dalam bidang Political Science daripada Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia, dan sekarang sedang meneruskan pengajian dalam bidang meneruskan pengajian PhD beliau dalam bidang Strategic and International Studies di Universiti Malaya. So beliau dah lama berada di Malaysia dan sebenarnya telah berkahwin dengan orang Malaysia. Okay? He has been a very good spokesperson for Palestinian in Malaysia, insyaAllah. Okay, jadi untuk meneruskan forum kita pada pagi ini, saya rasa disebabkan masa terhad, kita hanya ada 1 round sahaja. So saya akan berikan soalan kepada panelis, keempat panelis, kemudian kita dan saya mungkin terpaksa berikan masa 15 minit sahaja. Minta maaf sangat-sangat. Kemudian baru saya buka kepada soalan untuk semua yang hadir pada hari ini untuk menanyakan soalan kepada panelis kita. Untuk jadikan flow dia cantik, boleh tak saya nak mulakan dahulu dengan Profesor Nazari. Saya mulakan dengan Profesor Hafidzi. kemudian bekerja dengan Profesor Roslan untuk cover bahagian background. Kemudian baru saya ikuti dengan Cik Muslim Imran. Yang terakhir saya reserve untuk Tan Seri, supaya kita boleh banyak sikit dari Tan Seri, pengalaman beliau sebagai menteri sebelum ini. InsyaAllah kalau begitu saya serahkan kepada Dr. Hafidzi untuk cover bahagian yang saya serahkan kepada Dr. Hafidzi untuk terangkan kepada kita latar belakang dan signifikan kepada deklarasi Balfour ini. Itu saya serahkan kepada Dr. Hafidzi, insyaAllah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada saudara-saudari Imran selaku moderator Tan Seri untuk hormati Prof. Madya Dr. Roslan dan juga brother Muslim. Saya menjagakan tadi. Can I speak in Malay boleh? Maybe a bit of mixing English and bahasa. Never mind. I was actually thinking that I will be the last. Jadi untungnya jadi last speaker ni don't have much to say because everything has been delivered by the other speakers. Tapi turn out that I am the first speaker. Never mind. Okay, bercakap tentang background Balfour. It's a small piece of paper. Satu dokumen pendek ringkas 67 perkataan. Betul, 67 perkataan satu. Tapi walaupun dokumen ini, deklarasi ini suatu yang ringkas, pendek, just piece of paper, dia adalah culmination ataupun kemuncak pada satu agenda yang disusun dengan penuh rapi dan terperinci yang dilaksanakan di peringkat antarabangsa oleh pemain-pemain utama yang merupakan kuasa-kuasa penjaga barat pada waktu itu. So, jangan lose sight of the fact. Paper yang kecil ni sebenarnya adalah di belakangnya adalah satu perancangan yang cukup panjang, rapi, tersusun, sistem. Baik. Nah, event paling besar sebab masa pendek yang diberikan ini, saya akan terus menyampaikan dengan ringkas. Event besar yang berlaku yang merupakan latar belakang kepada deklarasi Balfour ini adalah Perang Dunia Pertama. Who started it? Siapa memulakan Perang Dunia Pertama? That is not important. Macam-macam naratif ada. Tetapi siapa yang mendapat keuntungan daripada ini yang menjadi titik perbicaraan. Siapa yang mendapat keuntungan? Definitely, pastinya yang mendapat keuntungan adalah Zionist International Organization, yang mana peranan yang paling besar dimainkan oleh Zionist Federation of Britain, ZFB, saya ringkaskan Z. Now, bila serentak berlakunya Perang Dunia Pertama itu adalah Hussein McMahon correspondence 14, 14, 15. Now, seringkasnya correspondence ini merupakan surat menyurat antara Syarif Hussein bin Ali, iaitu pemerintah bagi Hijaz pada waktu itu, dengan British Commissioner Egypt, McMahon. Tujuannya adalah untuk memerdekakan bangsa Arab daripada Uthman. Itu saja. Okey, itu langkah pertama. Langkah kedua ialah pada tahun 1916 berlaku satu kita bukan perjanjian, tapi satu atur cara yang disepakati oleh British dengan Perancis. The French was backing untuk menjayakan agenda Zionis ini. Namanya Sykes-Picot Agreement. Nah, Sykes-Picot inilah yang melahirkan negara-negara bangsa atau nation state yang dikenal pada Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, dan juga sempadan Iraq sebahagiannya, dan juga sempadan Turki di sebelah utara. So, itulah latar belakang. Nah, Sykes-Picot ni, Sykes ni namanya adalah Mark Sykes, dan beliau ini adalah a member of the Zionist Federation of Britain, ZFB. Okey. Now, yang menariknya kalau kita perhatikan Sykes-Picot Agreement ni, dia telah membentuk satu enclave, satu kawasan yang roughly merupakan sempadan negara Palestin dan occupied Palestin pada hari ini, yang dikenal pasti sebagai international zone. The rest of the area is either under the British rule or British influence and the French rule and French influence. We don't want to get into the detail of it. Tapi kita nak fokus on that enclave, that international zone yang roughly membentuk, secara kasarnya membentuk sempadan negara Palestin yang terjajah. Okay. That is as far as 1916. Now let's look at the military objective. Sebab Zionis punya agenda ini dia dilaksanakan melalui dua saluran. It's a two-pronged approach. Satu, the political movement. Another one is the military objective. Now let's look at the military objective very reasonably. Langkah ketenteraan atau objektif ketenteraan yang disusun ialah untuk take Uthmaniyah out of the equation. Sebab itulah berlakunya the Gallipoli campaign, which killed roughly 500,000 soldiers, almost 300,000 from among the Allies, the British and Australia, and a similar number of Syed from among the Ottoman. So siapa-siapa pergi Turki, jangan pergi kapal dunia. You have to go to Gallipoli and contemplate on the sacrifices yang dilakukan oleh umat Islam untuk mempertahankan Istanbul. Why is it so important? Because Winston Churchill, another member of Zionist Federation, you see the players. Masa itu dia merupakan military strategist. He's not yet the Prime Minister of Britain. Dia mengatakan, okay, cuba catat ni kata-kata Winston Churchill. Istanbul is much better than London and Paris put together. Istanbul is much better. Pasal semua Constantinople. The classical name of Istanbul is Constantinople. Constantinople is much better than London and Paris put together. See how important the Gallipoli campaign. But it failed miserably. So now Zionist Federation of Britain, mereka ini mempunyai satu agenda besar. Apakah prime objektif mereka? Ialah untuk menubuhkan Jewish national movement yang diputuskan melalui satu resolusi yang dicapai pada tahun 1897 di Basel, yang mana terbentuknya the Zionist International Organization under Theodore Herzl. We don't want to get too much into that part of history, tetapi resolusinya untuk mendirikan sebuah negara Yahudi, Homeland, sebuah negara Yahudi yang tersendiri, yang tempatnya tidak ditetapkan. Asalnya, itu yang menarik, asalnya tempat-tempat yang dipilih untuk Jewish National Movement adalah Uganda ataupun Tanzania, dan juga one country Argentina. Tetapi it's not the feeling enough. Dia tidak menarik. That's why Theodore Herzl telah menggunakan sentimen agama dan menjadikan Palestin sebagai sebagai target sasaran untuk mendirikan negara Yahudi yang tersendiri, yang sebenarnya merupakan blasphemy. That's why kalau kita tengok the Jewish religious group macam Datuk, they are against Israel because what the Israeli is doing now is blasphemous. Occupying Palestine is blasphemous. They can only come after the return of the so-called Messiah. That's why the Christian Zionists supporting Israel. They want the Armageddon to happen as soon as possible. Never mind. Baik. Ini susah juga ni semua. Saya tak bukan macam saudara kaya dia nak bukan dari terus ada trade dia dari luar. Jadi apabila military objektif tadi gagal bukan saja di Gallipoli, tetapi gagal di Mesopotamia, presently Iraq, Sinai, it was a storm, and then the British was stuck in a stalemate in Western Europe, dekat Somi, dekat Jordan. They cannot move. So what happened? They need the support of the Americans. Now the Americans are tired of war. The Americans letih dengan perang saudara, dengan perang Spanish-American War of 1899, and they are also tired in the Philippines fighting the Moros and the Filipinos. So they don't want to have anything to do with war. So what happened? The Zionist Federation of Britain dragged America into the war. That's why America came late to the picture, 1970. The war started in 1940s, tapi America entered First War 1917 dengan cara-cara yang sangat mencurigakan. Please Google how the liner, the passenger liner Lusitania was sank in 1970, torpedoed by a German submarine. It so happened that this so-called passenger liner is actually bringing military ordnance, membawa peluru meriam dan sebagainya, and became a legitimate target of the Germans, and that actually triggered the American public to support to support America to enter the war, and that actually saved, not saved the British, but actually saved the objective Zionist Federation. So that is the background. Bila America came into the picture, now the day is saved. So that's how Balfour Declaration came into the picture. Is through one contribution by a Zionist chemist, also a member of Zionist family. So ingat, berapa nama dah saya sebut, it's not just the 6 jahanam. And it is not the 6 jahanam. The top one and not the bottom one. The bottom one are the heroes. The top one are the BDS. Konon ada heroes. So the chemist is called Time Weisman. Dia telah menghasilkan satu ciptaan namanya chloride that produce massive explosion, so help the British in producing the most powerful dynamite. And kononnya kerajaan Britain ni terhutang budi dengan Time Weisman ni, maka dia berbincang dengan Herbert Samuel. Herbert Samuel adalah Home Minister, again a member of Chinese Federation. See? So mereka berbincang dan akhirnya bersetuju untuk realize the idea of forming a Jewish national home in time. So they asked Arthur Balfour, which is a foreign secretary, to write a brief declaration, submit kepada siapa? Lord Rothschild, Lord Baron Rothschild, which is also a member of Zionist Federation of Britain, saying that the wish of the Jewish people will be granted. And this is passed, ini dipersetujui oleh the British Prime Minister waktu itu George Lloyd dan Lloyd George, and it is the House of Commons gave an eye bersetuju, maka this piece of paper, the declaration of the Balfour Declaration, became an official document, dan menjadi asas kepada berdirinya negara Israel pada tahun 1948. Ringkas saja what they did with the Arabs. So apa yang dilakukan oleh Winston Churchill? Now, kita lihat pada tahun 1919, King Sharif Hussein bin Ali bersama dengan anak-anaknya, iaitu Faisal Hussein dan juga Abdullah Hussein. Macam mana to pacify these people? Macam mana to pacify these people? 1919, they organized a conference in Paris. And Paris conference, and let me read out kata-kata daripada Syekh Faisal Hussein yang merupakan anak kepada Sharif Hussein of Hijaz. Dia kata, kami bangsa Arab melihat dengan penuh simpati kepada pergerakan Zionis. See, even the Arab sympathize. They are supposed to be the yang menjaga kepentingan dan kedudukan bangsa Arab, mengatakan kami penuh simpati dengan pergerakan Zionis. Rombongan kami di Paris memahami dengan mendalam kertas cadangan yang dikemukakan oleh Pertuan Zionis di persidangan keamanan ini, dan kami menganggapnya sebagai sopan dan wajar. I think history is being repeated. We have been listening this time and time again, even right now. Even after 100 years, we keep on hearing this kind of speeches from the so-called Arab leaders. Kami akan lakukan terbaik di pihak kami untuk membantu mereka. Kami akan mengadu-adukan kepulangan Yahudi. Saya mengimpikan dan rakyat saya turut mengimpikan masa hadapan di mana kami akan membantu anda dan anda membantu kami agar wilayah sama-sama kita kongsi kepentingan di dalamnya akan kembali mengambil tempatnya di kalangan masyarakat yang pertama. Lastly, macam mana nak pacify, macam mana nak puaskan hati mereka. Nah, inilah yang berlaku pada tahun 1922. Wilayah yang dinamakan Transjordan tadi diserahkan kepada anak-anak Sharif Hussein bin Ali, iaitu Abdullah bin Hussein mendapat apa yang dikatakan Jordan. Di situlah keturunan King of Jordan pada hari ini, dan Faisal Husin diberikan Iraq sebelum ianya digulingkan oleh kemudian. Jadi inilah sedikit latar belakang yang mampu saya sampaikan, tetapi di sana ada banyak footnote yang perlu diteliti untuk memahami proses ini. Apa ringkasnya kesimpulannya yang dah kita tegaskan kat sini, is just a small paper, a small piece of document, this declaration of the Balfour Declaration ini, dan tapi the background, latar belakang yang menunjukkan suatu perancangan yang penuh rapi yang melibatkan, it's not just a collective effort, tapi it is a collective effort that managed to write on the most powerful institution back then, which is the House of Commons, which controlled almost half of the world at that time. Wallahu a'lam bishawab. Billahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kepada Dr. Hafidzi atas keberhasilan tentang background ni. So sangat-sangat kita dapat lihat bagaimana banyak pihak terlibat dalam rangka untuk menerbitkan deklarasi ini walaupun sebenarnya yang menerima manfaat itu hanyalah sekadar satu pertubuhan, bukan negara, bukan partner dalam perang atau sebagainya, tapi satu entiti yang kecil sahaja, tetapi ada kuasa besar belakangnya yang memastikan deklarasi ini berjaya dikeluarkan. Sesungguhnya kepada Dr. Roslan, saya nak minta Dr. Roslan juga untuk berikan sedikit latar belakang lagi, tambah lagi berapa yang kami telah sebutkan tadi, dan mungkin boleh tambah bahagian apakah peranan ataupun influence agama dalam konflik ini juga, sebab Dr. Hafidzi sebut tentang Kristian Zionis kan. So kita dengar sikit daripada Dr. Roslan, insyaAllah. Saya serahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Uhayyikum bi tahiyyatil Islam wa tahiyyatul Islam assalam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada saudara pimpinan majlis, saudara Hamid yang saya hormati dan saya kasihi, Tan Sri Datuk Sri Syed Hamid Albar, bekas Menteri Luar Malaysia, rakan panel yang seterusnya, Profesor Madya, Dr. Hafidzi Noor, dan juga saudara Muslim Imran, dan tidak saya lupakan kepada Profesor Nazari yang ketika beliau approach saya untuk mengadakan program ini, saya rasa kita kena buatlah, kerana ia bukan satu pilihan tapi satu benda untuk kita memberikan kefahaman kepada masyarakat kita, kefahaman berkaitan dengan apa yang berlaku sejarah di Timur Tengah ini. Seterusnya rakan-rakan mahasiswa dan mahasiswi yang dikasihi sekalian, alhamdulillah, saya sangat setuju apa yang disebutkan oleh Dr. Hafidzi serta tadi. Dia kata kalau dia wish untuk jadi panelis yang terakhir kerana tak perlu cakap banyak. Jadi apabila Dr. Hafidzi dah cakap, saya pun tak perlu cakap banyak lah. Cuma sedikit sahaja tambahan, mungkin sebagai orang kata melihat isu ini secara keseluruhan. Saya nak bawakan secara mudah sahaja. Apabila World Zionist Organization itu terbentuk pada tahun 1897 melalui satu persidangan di Basel. Dalam persidangan tersebut disetujui bahawa Theodor Herzl ini akan mengetuai World Zionist Organization, dan di dalam persidangan tersebut dibentangkan satu apa matlamat yang ingin dibuat oleh World Zionist Organization. Maka ada satu dokumen yang dikenali dengan nama Der Judenstaat. Der Judenstaat ini kalau kita lihat diterjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Inggeris, dia panggil The State of Israel. Jadi di situ sudah ada perancangan mula untuk mereka membina satu negara bagi bangsa Israel. Kenapa mereka ingin membina negara untuk bangsa Israel ini? Kerana bangsa Israel ini adalah bangsa yang dikenali sebagai diaspora nation, yang berada di merata-rata tempat, dan mereka ini tidak mendapat pembelaan yang sewajarnya, terutamanya golongan Yahudi yang berada di Eropah Timur, yang berada di Jerman, yang berada di Hungary, yang berada di sebelah-sebelah timur Eropah ini, yang mana mereka ini kalau kita lihat terseksa kehidupan mereka, dan kehidupan mereka bukan second class citizen, bahkan ada yang mengatakan bahawa mereka ini third class citizen. kerana penindasan-penindasan yang dilakukan oleh golongan ini. Jadi mereka ingin membentuk satu perjuangan bagi mewujudkan sebuah negara ini. Lalu direkaskan cerita tadi yang pada tahun 1917 itu merupakan satu event yang besar yang kalau kita lihat hari ini adalah merupakan punca kuasa untuk tertubuhnya negara Israel itu. Sayangnya di dalam dokumen tersebut memang menjadi satu tragedi lah kepada kita, kerana disebutkan secara jelas bahawa penubuhan negara Yahudi itu adalah di Palestin, a Jewish national home in Palestine. Disebut secara jelas di dalam dokumen tersebut, dan itu yang saya kira menjadi satu tragedi yang besar di dalam sejarah umat Islam di Timur Tengah ini. Dan kalau kita lihat apa yang berlaku seterusnya, itu adalah merupakan tindakan-tindakan lanjut yang dilakukan oleh mereka ke arah untuk menubuhkan negara ini, dan mereka tidak lagi berkompromi untuk menubuhkan negara-negara itu, negara Israel ini di tempat-tempat lain. Mereka tidak berkompromi lagi, sama ada kalau dalam perancangan asalnya nak pilih Uganda ataupun Tanzania ataupun Argentina itu. Tapi akhirnya apabila mereka memilih dengan dasar agama untuk menubuhkan negara Israel itu di Palestin di atas dasar agama ini, maka mereka terus bekerja keras melakukan lobby-lobby sehingga tertubuhnya negara Israel ini pada tahun 1948. Tapi perjalanannya bukan perjalanan yang singkat, merupakan perjalanan dan perancangan yang rapi, merupakan perjalanan yang jauh, dan pelbagai usaha dilakukan oleh mereka, termasuk pihak lobby Zionis ini berjumpa dengan Sultan Abdul Hamid II, Sultan Abdul Hamid II, dan meminta supaya Sultan Abdul Hamid II ini menyerahkan Palestin untuk dijadikan negara Israel. Tetapi kita lihat apabila pelobi-pelobi Zionis ini bertemu dengan Sultan Abdul Hamid, Sultan Abdul Hamid very clear. Dia kata tanah ini adalah tanah milik umat Islam, kita tak boleh nak bagi kepada orang Israel. Inilah juga jawapan yang diberikan oleh Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi kepada Richard the Lionheart ketika pada waktu itu tahun 1186-87 Richard the Lionheart ini dia nak kawasan tersebut, tapi ditolak oleh Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi. Dan kalau kita lihat kekuatan apa yang orang kata menjadi kekuatan kepada Sultan Abdul Hamid II ini, walaupun kita tahu bahawa pada waktu itu Turki ini terlibat di dalam perancangan Perang Dunia Pertama apa semua itu, Turki dengan Jerman kalah apa semua itu, tetapi Sultan Abdul Hamid II ini tetap untuk mempertahankan tanah Palestin ini supaya tidak jatuh kepada pihak yang lain. Namun begitu disebabkan oleh perancangan-perancangan yang rapi ini, pada tahun 1917 itu juga Palestin ini dijajah oleh British. Pada tahun 1920 British telah diberikan mandat untuk mentadbir Palestin, dan di Palestin itu pentadbiran pada waktu zaman British itu diberikan right of return kepada bangsa-bangsa Yahudi. Dan kepada bangsa-bangsa Yahudi ini diberikan hak untuk kembali ke Palestin. Untuk apa? Untuk diubah demografi tanah Palestin itu untuk memperbanyakkan bangsa-bangsa Yahudi di situ, yang akhirnya memudahkan untuk mereka menumbuhkan negara Israel ini. Jadi right of return ini dilaksanakan, masyarakat bangsa-bangsa Yahudi duduk di sebelah Eropah apa semua ini digalakkan untuk balik ke Palestin. Untuk balik ke Palestin. Kalau kita lihat ada satu gambar yang biasa apabila kita membicarakan tentang sejarah Palestin ini, ada 4 peta yang diberikan pada tahun sebelum 1900 itu. Sangat-sangat sedikit orang Palestin orang Israel orang Yahudi di Palestin. Pada tahun dia berubah akhirnya orang Palestin itu menjadi kurang kependudukannya, dan penduduk bangsa Yahudi ini ramai di Palestin, yang memudahkan untuk mereka menumbuhkan sebuah negara ini. Apabila British keluar daripada tanah Palestin pada tahun 1948, 14 Mei dia keluar, 15 Mei itu diisytiharkan penubuhan negara Israel, berasaskan kepada sokongan-sokongan yang telah seperti mana yang diberitakan ataupun diceritakan oleh Dr. Hafidzi tadi. Dan dari sudut perjuangan, kenapa mereka memilih tanah Palestin? Ini yang kita nak kena tengok. Kenapa dipilih tanah ini secara khusus? Tidak dipilih umpamanya di Uganda tadi ataupun di Argentina. Itu semua tidak menarik bagi mereka. Kerana Palestin ini adalah, kalau di dalam sejarah Islam, dan kita lihat di dalam penulisan-penulisan para sarjana, mereka menyatakan bahawa Jerusalem is one city terrific, satu bandar yang orang kata mempunyai signifikan kepada 3 agama besar, Kristian, Yahudi dan juga Islam. Jadi mereka ini menganggap bahawasanya tempat atau tanah Palestin itu adalah very significant kepada agama mereka. Dan kalau bangsa Yahudi, disitulah tempat di mana mereka sepatutnya membina ataupun mendapat kembali kerajaan mereka yang seperti mana yang terbina pada zaman Nabi Daud dan juga Nabi Sulaiman. Sebenarnya sampai ke hari ini mereka masih lagi mencari bukti kewujudan sejarah agung mereka itu zaman Nabi Daud dan Nabi Sulaiman. Haikal Sulaiman itu sampai sekarang mereka mencari menggali di bawah kawasan Masjid Al-Aqsa itu. Tidak ditemui satu pun bukti yang merujuk kepada Haikal Sulaiman pada zaman Nabi Sulaiman alaihissalam. Dan mereka terus menggali sebenarnya. Dan itulah yang sebahagian menyatakan bahawa sekarang ini Al-Aqsa in danger, Al-Aqsa dalam bahaya, kerana pengorekan untuk mencari bahan-bahan sejarah itu boleh sebenarnya meruntuhkan Masjid Al-Aqsa apabila berlaku pergerakan-pergerakan bumi yang boleh menyebabkan terowong itu pecah dan akhirnya Masjid Al-Aqsa itu jatuh ke bawah. Saya ada seorang kawan saya yang mengajar di An-Najah University yang membuat satu kajian berkaitan dengan ekologi ini. Tidak dibenarkan untuk dia masuk, melainkan diiringi oleh pegawai-pegawai daripada Israel. Maksudnya kita nak masuk ke dalam terowong itu tidak boleh secara sembarangan. Perlu kebenaran daripada pihak Israel. Jadi saya rasa itu yang orang kata apabila kita melihat kepada apa yang berlaku ini telah memberikan satu kesan yang sangat besar kepada umat Islam, yang sehingga ke hari ini kita telah kehilangan satu tanah yang begitu signifikan, yang begitu bersejarah di dalam sejarah kita, sejarah Islam kita itu sendiri. Jadi saya rasa cukup sekadar cukup untuk perkongsian daripada saya, kerana saya fikir panel-panel lain akan membicarakan dengan lebih lanjut berkaitan dengan ini. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih kepada Prof. Madya dan Roslan. Bagi siapa yang nak ambil maklum lebih lagi tentang signifikannya Islamic Jerusalem ataupun Jerusalem, yang bernama Jerusalem ini adalah terjemahan, cubaan untuk menterjemahkan perkataan Baitul Maqdis. Saya maklumkan. So boleh dapatkan buku Dr. Roslan sendiri yang baru dilancarkan sebelum ini untuk maklumat lanjut. Dan Dr. Hafidzi tadi ketika dia baca tentang quote daripada Fasal tadi, ada dalam buku ini, buku kecil ini yang ada dijual di luar, yang merangkumkan beberapa tajuk tentang Zionis. Dan tajuk buku ni lagi hak akbar fardu ain, sebab dia ambil mulanya konflik itu daripada perang dunia yang pertama seperti mana disebutkan oleh Dr. Hafidzi sebentar tadi. Okey, itu sedikit latar belakang tentang deklarasi Balfour dan bagaimana situasi ketika itu yang menyebabkan timbulnya deklarasi ini. Untuk slot yang seterusnya saya nak bawa kepada implikasi. So ada dua, insyaAllah Badan Muslim akan saya serahkan seterusnya kepada Encik Muslim untuk mendapatkan kepada kita implikasi kepada deklarasi ini. Yang kita lihat hanyalah sekadar sekeping surat, tapi memberikan implikasi yang sangat besar kepada di Palestin khususnya, juga kepada kawasan di Timur Tengah juga. InsyaAllah itu saya teruskan, saya serahkan kepada Encik Muslim insyaAllah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Brother Khalid, Dan Seri, Syed Hamid, Dr. Roslan, Dr. Hafidzi, and our beloved Prof. Nazari, Dr. Syed, Soul, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum once again, and Jum'ah Mubarak to you all. When talking about the Balfour Declaration, one thinks that we're talking history. But being a Palestinian who has seen what Balfour Declaration and the following British policy has caused to us in Palestine, I assure you it's not history. We are not talking about history now. We are talking about reality, about ongoing agony, about daily suffering of millions of Palestinians, not only Palestinians, but other Arabs in the Golan Heights, occupied Golan Heights, and other parts of the Middle East. So Balfour is not history for us. It's our daily suffering. And I quote what British historian Arnold Toynbee said, the tragedy in Palestine is a grave injustice that is a menace to world peace. And it truly is a hindrance, an obstacle to world peace. As long as there is suffering and injustice ongoing in Palestine, it will be very difficult for billions of Muslims, at least, to accept and swallow what is happening and let this injustice continue. So let's take a closer look. Since this is not history, this is a daily life, let's take a closer look at what this declaration and its following developments have caused to the Palestinians. Look at Gaza Strip, for instance. More than 2 million Palestinians live in an open-air prison. Look at the West Bank. Brother Takashi has mentioned that millions of Palestinians live under military rule. And a daily policy of apartheid is being implemented and imposed on them. Look at the millions of Palestinians who live under so-called Israel, 1948 territories. They are living a daily apartheid life. Look at over 6 million Palestinians in the diaspora. These are denied return to their homeland, while any one proclaiming to be a Jew can actually migrate to Palestine and settle in occupied Palestine. So the root cause of all this suffering, the root cause of all these problems is the creation of the State of Israel, is the British mandate over Palestine that facilitated the creation of Israel. It is necessary, when talking about the implications of such a declaration, to examine how this has happened. This document was a problem, the declaration was a problem, but the way it was implemented was also another problem. So if you read through the declaration, it talks about a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. That can be interpreted in other ways as well. It is a very vague declaration. You could actually send the Jews to Palestine without giving them political authority over the land of Palestine, political sovereignty. They could have become citizens of Palestine without taking over the administration of Palestine and forcing out its own people. But the British wanted it to be done this way, to create a foreign state in the Middle East. So in 1917, the British invaded Palestine early November. 2nd of November, Balfour issued this declaration. And when they invaded Palestine, they made sure that they controlled every inch of Palestine. 100,000 British troops were in Palestine by the end of the 1917. They appointed a Jewish commissioner in Palestine, even though the Jews back then were proportionally marginal, but very trivial. A very small number of Palestinian Jews as well as migrant Jews were living in Palestine, but they appointed a Jewish commissioner in Palestine, and they continued to deny Palestinians the right to self-determination. Palestinians, the elites of the Palestinian community back then, political parties, we had several political parties, community leaders, the Islamic High Council, they all demanded an elected parliament. The British continued to deny us this very basic right up until the creation of Israel. And to make it worse, the British facilitated Jewish migration to Palestine. The British were probably feeling some guilt, seeing the Nazis massacring Jews in Europe. So they facilitated the migration of some Jews in the 30s. But how about the 20s? The British facilitated for hundreds of thousands of Jews to come to Palestine even before the Nazis have come to power. So it was a plan, as Prof. Hafidzi has earlier highlighted. There were many members of the British Zionist Federation involved in this crime. In the years to come, Palestinians did not swallow this insult and stand still. They resisted it in different ways. In 1922, there was Albar revolution, where the Palestinians revolted against the Jewish incident that happened in near Albar wall, near Al-Aqsa Mosque. The following years witnessed the 1935 Qassam revolution. And Razil Qassam is a Syrian scholar who came to Palestine and joined the struggle against the British mandate. 1936, the Great Palestinian Revolution, where Palestinians staged one of the longest strikes in history for 6 months, protesting Jewish migration as well as British mandate or occupation of Palestine. And since 1936 until 1947, Britain made sure that it has eliminated every element of Palestinian resistance, making it very easy for the Zionist militias to set up a homeland or a state in Palestine. In less than 11 years, they made sure that they expelled Palestinian leaders. The Grand Mufti of Palestine, Hamid, who was more or less the president of the Palestinian people back then, was sent to exile. Hundreds of Palestinians were massacred, were detained and exiled. And we all, in Palestinian side, we all remember the story of the 3 Palestinians who were detained in the late, in the 30s and sentenced to death for claims that they supported resistance against the Israeli, against the British mandate. In those incidents, people used to be sentenced to death for having one bullet, one empty bullet at home. If a Palestinian has weapons, they would be sentenced to death. While at the other side, the Zionist militias were actually being armed by the British. They were trained by the British, and they took the opportunity of the Second World War to join British troops and to get equipment, training, and other facilities from the British. The British made sure that all big economic projects also go to the Jewish immigrants. The electric generators project, the port project, etc. They were all handed over to the Jewish immigrants coming to Palestine. This kind of policy reinforced in the mentality of many of the Jewish immigrants that they are actually better people. You know this myth that Israel created, that Palestine was a land without people for people without land. They thought that they were the advanced, the smart Europeans who have come to desert to convert it into heaven. Why? Because the British were facilitating this. They were actually making this happen. So by the year 1947, when the partition plan was passed in the United Nations, the ground was ready for a new Israeli state to be established. Within 6 months, the Zionist militias, very well equipped, they also outnumbered all Arab armies that came to Palestine in the following year. These Jewish agencies as well as militias were able to create a state under the supervision of the British. So the British were involved. They perpetrated the crime of the creation of the state of Israel. They were not only observers, they were involved. And by the year 1948, when Nakba occurred, when Israel declared its independence, the British were actually watching the crimes happening, and they left a night before the declaration of the independence, or the creation of the state of Israel, making it very easy for the Jewish militias and the Zionist militias to set up a state in Palestine. So, when talking about the British role in Palestine, it was not one of an observer, it was one of a perpetrator. The ethnic cleansing that took place in the years 1947 and 1948 was, as I said, facilitated by the British. They were in their military barracks next to Palestinian towns and cities that were murdered and were burned down by the Zionist militias. In many incidents, in Haifa, in Jaffa, in so many other cities. And in 1947, 1948, Israel managed to destroy over 500 Palestinian towns and cities. So they changed the map of Palestine. They forced more than 700,000 Palestinians to go into exile. Their numbers now go beyond 6 or 7 million Palestinian refugees. So the British were involved, but what other crimes did the British do? It's not enough to talk about the Balfour Declaration and the creation of the state of Israel. Let's look at the whole map of the Middle East. Do you see any mess going on in the Middle East these days? Do you see civil wars here and there? Do you see border disputes here and there? The British were not just involved in creating this, they created this. Dr. Hafidzi mentioned Sykes-Picot. The French were also involved, but the British colonized most of the Middle Eastern nations. You try to list all the countries that they colonized in the Middle East: Iraq, Iran, Palestine, Jordan, South Yemen, Somalia, Egypt, Sudan, the Gulf, the Arab Peninsula. They occupied most of these territories that you hear in news every day. So one of their biggest mistakes or crimes was designing these states to fail. These states were designed to fail. Arab unity was obstructed by the British. They created all kinds of mechanisms to prevent Arab unity. One of them is the Arab League. Instead of political unity, an institution was created to hinder political unity. But also, drawing the border itself was one of the biggest crimes committed by the British. You look now at Iraq, the Kurdish problem. Iraq is a state that was drawn by the British. They made sure that they include problematic elements to make it difficult for any state to survive. You look at the Gulf now. Amongst the members of the GCC, there are border disputes between all of them. All of the Gulf states have border disputes, including those who are very close friends and allies now. They have border disputes that can pop up anytime. And look at, of course, Palestine and Jordan. A state was created in the Palestinian land by the name of Israel. The British not only caused all these problems, but also were involved in later policies that made sure that made sure it repressed the people of the region. We have all studied about the Suez Crisis, when the British joined forces with the Israelis and the French to also attack Egypt and continue the repression of the people of the region. So what do Palestinians expect from the British, knowing that this British policy has resulted in a lot of suffering, 100 years of suffering? What do Palestinians expect? Thousands of Palestinians marched in London a few days ago, and many pro-Palestine supporters marched here in Kuala Lumpur, in Jakarta, and in many other parts of the world. What do all these people expect? The first thing that we expect from the British is an apology. And they have not come with an apology yet. Not only that, they have added insult to injury by welcoming Netanyahu to London and granting him a state honor welcome and recognizing Britain's role in creating the state of Israel. Theresa May is proud of the British role in creating the state of Israel. She's proud of a policy that resulted in the killing of hundreds of thousands, the driving out of millions of Palestinians from their homelands. So the first demand is apology. This is the minimum. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for our colonizers to commit what they have done in the past. You read the history of the Third World. Most of the European colonizers have not apologized for what they have done until today. I was shocked a few years ago when the Dutch read a statement of apology to the Indonesians in the Dutch embassy in Jakarta, if I'm not mistaken, and they did not want to bring in any legal consequences for their apology for 300 years of occupation. It's shocking. The minimum that colonizers should do is apologizing for the crimes that were committed by their states. And I don't blame the people of Britain or any other colonizing country today for the crimes committed by their great-grandfathers. I don't. But the minimum that they can do, the moral responsibility that they have and the legal responsibility is to acknowledge the crimes committed by their states, their governments, and their great-grandfathers, and to try to correct it. So an apology is demanded from the British. We will continue to demand it, and they will apologize. Eventually they will apologize, inshallah. The second thing that we expect is a recognition of the Palestinian state. Well, you are proud of creating the state of Israel, the homeland for the Jewish people. How about the homeland of the Palestinian people? Can't the British just recognize an independent Palestinian state? Over 100 countries have recognized an independent Palestinian state. The British are probably the last to do so. They still have not done so. Another demand is compensation for the millions of Palestinians who have suffered from the British policies. Compensation for those who have suffered from the British mandate, 30 years of mandate, and compensations for the following years of suffering. And finally, we hope that they will, in the future, take an unbiased position from the conflict. We don't want them to, we don't expect them to side by us against Israel in the near future, but the minimum that they could do is to at least be neutral in this conflict. So it is my hope that through this quick overview that we highlighted how the Balfour Declaration has actually been used and misused to create a state for the Jews in Palestine and to impose suffering on the Palestinian people. What supporters of the Palestinian right can do is to talk about this suffering, to highlight it to the world, to make sure that other parts of the world that are not aware of what's happening get information and start action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so from one Muslim presentation just now, so the biggest, I can say the biggest implication of Balfour Declaration is, of course, the suffering of the Palestinian, but also the creation of the state of Israel. So now we go to our final panelist, Seri. I do believe Tan Sri have a lot to share with us because he's our former foreign minister, and I do believe during his tenure, a lot of things in terms of international politics, he has somehow I switched to English. So Datuk ada banyak pengalaman ketika menjadi Menteri Luar Negara. Sebab ketika saya search malam dalam internet ketika zaman Datuk jadi Tan Sri jadi Menteri Luar Negara, tempoh 99 sampai 2008, dan ketika itu juga tahun 99 dengan tahun 2000 Malaysia adalah ahli kepada UN Security Council waktu yang sama. So dan dalam tempoh itu juga, dalam tempoh perkhidmatan Tan Sri juga berlakunya Intifada yang kedua, berlakunya perang di Lebanon antara Israel dengan Lebanon. So ada banyak mungkin Tan Sri boleh kongsikan kepada kita di international politics ketika itu juga, dan juga what sort of problems yang terpaksa dihadapi in terms of Malaysia punya polisi juga luar negara dengan konflik yang berlaku di Timur Tengah. InsyaAllah saya serahkan kepada Tan Sri.
Terima kasih saudara moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Nama saya Syed Hamid Albar. Saya datang ke sini bukan sebagai ahli politik dan saya dah bersara daripada politik. I don't think you should refer to me as ahli politik. Dan sebagai saya nak mengatakan terima kasih kepada ahli panel. Sebenarnya it's the first time that I am the last speaker. I've never been the last speaker. So that's how important you place foreign policy. So saya pasal saya mulakan macam ni. You see, I think if you look at the history of Palestine, the history of at that time it is called Far East or Middle East now we call, it's all related to foreign policy. We fail to appreciate the British is a master of words and semantics on diplomacy. When they say in the Balfour Declaration, it's not a legal document. Balfour Declaration is nothing. It's not a legal document. And what they did was they put it nicely to create a home. And then at the end of it, they say, without depriving the civil and social rights of other communities. Because we do not, these are foreign international relations document. It's just a document. When we say that, without that, Palestinians don't exist. At that time, you don't exist. You are just other communities. But they have recognized the Jewish community. So I think, and then when we refer to Hussein McMahon letter, when we refer to Faisal agreement, I think we have to look at the reality today. I like what Muslim just now said, Balfour agreement and so on. The Balfour agreement was nearly debunked many times. You know, we have got our supporter from the beginning, like Lord Curzon, like Edwin Montagu, who is the first Jew to become a cabinet minister. He was not in favor of the creation of the state of Israel. So all these things, but because we were so inundated, I'm talking about the Arab countries, we were so inundated because of British influence to get rid of the Ottoman Empire. Our problem is not a problem of British colonization, but our problem was how the Arabs have been suppressed by the Ottoman, must get rid of the Ottoman. At the end of it, we never studied the Sykes-Picot, what they have in mind. Among the British, trying to make deals with the French. These are all foreign policy matters. Make deals with the French. And at the same time, trying to satisfy the Russian. But at the same time, they were playing also the French out. So all these are documents that are very sensitive. It is good for us to look at this sensitive document and study, because for us to think or to condemn Balfour is not possible. I think Prime Minister May is very clear. She said that that was the most beautiful document ever written. So how are you going to ask her to apologize? And when you look from the beginning, Winston Churchill, Lloyd George, and from the beginning when Balfour wrote it, they say, of course, this Palestinian, the Jewish home, is going to evolve into a state. And yet, none of our leaders then in that area have got a foreign policy position that recognize that we have a problem. So without recognizing problem, we cannot solve. And I think the most important thing yang paling mustahak sekali ialah kumpulan Zionis ini, we have our supporters in the Jewish group. And let us not make the mistake about Bani Israel. Bani Israel is also, we have to respect Bani Israel. But the current one, people from Central Asia who become controlled, the elite of Israel are not Bani Israel. So if we start to attack Bani Israel, I don't think it is right. We have to be very careful about it, Professor, because I think what we have not done is that we have not done in terms of two things in foreign policy. One is that diplomacy is an important instrument, and the British is master of diplomacy, together with the French. And we have no answer to what they have been doing. Now we cannot reverse that process. The British at that time, especially Balfour, especially Lloyd George, they have very low opinion about the Arabs of Palestine. They say these people are useless, cannot do anything. So all those things, we should not be reminding our people, but now must strategize for the future. You know, what Netanyahu is doing at present. If I looked at the Balfour Declaration, and then when the British gave up the mandate in 1947, and in 1948, United Nations declared the state of, and United Nations say it should be partition. We never continue, instead we want to annihilate Israel. Because of that, we lost a lot of time. And we did not, in terms of at the bilateral level, at the multilateral level, we do not propagate in order to make the case for Palestine. You know, the Palestine, Israel is a special state. It's no ordinary state. And the American foreign policy is premised on Israel. If you want to have how many resolutions of the United Nations have recognized the victims in the Middle East, the sufferings of the Palestinians, there is no problem. There is a lot of teams that have been set, not only on human rights, United Nations appointed teams that have said this is apartheid, this is not what is happening in Palestine, is against international law, but no American president or foreign policy will allow for any resolution to be implemented if it is against Israel. So I think we need to move now more so than it was before. Before it was quite successful. I think when Professor just now mentioned about a company that supplied. What about waste? You know, the Israeli control of waste is also used by the police. They know every one of us right into our home. So, I think that's what I would like, rather than us, let's go to look at history. But the narration of history now must be changed to bring to the current situation. The narration of history has caused us to be where we are today. You know, when what the British did when they came to the Malay world, say for example, where they brought in foreign workers because the Malays are lazy. That was the concept. So that is a normal thing. Don't let us not be cry, or let us not be not satisfied about it. I think it is not for the lack, to me, it is not for the lack of resolutions, it is not for the lack of recognition, it is not for the lack of human rights report about the atrocities committed, but it is the world at present, the United Nations is paralyzed as far as Israel. They are looked at as the victim. And every time we want to have an agreement with Israel, Israel will condition, dia punya itu ialah keselamatan dia mesti dijamin. Keselamatan. I went to the ICJ in order when they build the wall, because I called for a OIC meeting. When we objected to the building of the wall. Go to the building of the wall, you just simply build the wall, you cannot breathe, you cannot. So we went to ICJ with whom I decided to do the presentation myself at the ICJ. Bercakap kepada 15 hakim. Hakim ICJ ni lain daripada hakim biasa. First of all, originally our lawyers, international lawyers, wanted to do the presentation. I said no. I'm a trained barrister. I am an advocate and solicitor. And I am also an international law person. Why should I allow, I want to have an experience to do a presentation that day. You know, you speak to the 15 judges whose face is totally blank. We do not know how they are going to react. But alhamdulillah, they decided, but it is only an advisory opinion. We brought the case, OIC brought the case. It's an advisory opinion. They say that Israeli construction of the wall is illegal. You see, there are so many things that we have pronounced illegal about the Israelis. But nothing has been successful for us, you know, in order to stop the Israelis from doing what they are doing. So I think maybe now, at the, when you want to do a boycott in the 1980s, 1980s, the boycott was very successful, the boycott list. I remember the Palestinian boycott list, the database was superb. Now every Muslim country is being managed by the Israeli bankers, Israeli advisors, and I was looking at their history. Why they are successful? Because they penetrate the government. Government foreign policy, government finance, everything that is penetrated by Zionist organization. The USA, the ministers in UK, all of them have got some relationship. So I think now Allah actually has given us a lot of wealth. And I think Allah may take away from us. Because we have allowed other people to manage our wealth in order to defeat us as an international platform. So I think maybe, I don't want to speak very much, because if I speak very much, today is Friday, you know, so I'm trying to hurry up, because this sort of thing, on implication in terms of foreign policy. I went to see, when I was a foreign minister, I called for the meeting, emergency meeting. I remember Dr. Madya telling me, emergency meeting with Lebanon punya problem. Right? So I said, I want to call an emergency meeting. Dr. Madya told me, hey, Syed, this is short notice, how are you going to call leaders? I said, you tell me that you have no objection, then the rest is my work as a foreign. And we were very successful. We asked for the protection force. We got a protection force. Malaysia offered to send its troops. Israeli objected, don't want Malaysia in the lead. Ultimately, we got to be on the lead. We are at the border, at the protection force. So it's the way that we coordinate our foreign policy approaches that is very important. At present, I don't think there is a cohesive or unifying foreign policy position of the OIC countries. So because of that, a lot of our issues, and I decided when we were in charge of non-aligned movement, we want to go to Palestine. We asked South Africa to arrange it, because South Africa have got very good relations. Israel made a condition, we can come through Jordan, and then by Jordan we will go by helicopter to Ramallah. We went to Ramallah, met Allah Yarham, Al-Mahum Yasir Arafat. We met him. He can't even live in the bunk, I think, underground. So much we were talking and discussing with him. Then we went to see one hospital, to visit one hospital, where the Israelis are. Very, very good strategic thing. If you talk about the human rights that Takashi was talking just now about, when they want to shoot they make sure they shoot in an area that will lend. Then you can see young people, young Palestinians, who are hurt that they can never be useful in all sense. It's very, so they gave us only half an hour to stay there. When we came in from Jordan, 3 Israeli helicopters accompanied us. So I said, oh, maybe we will die like this one. So then, by the time we need half an hour, we have to get out of Ramallah. I wanted to go to Al-Aqsa more, so I cannot. Because Ramallah and Al-Aqsa is quite close, quite. So, but we are not allowed. So I think there is, I would like, if possible, for the Palestinian Union and PDS, MyCARE, focus more attention on our foreign policy approaches at the bilateral and multilateral level. You see, the Japanese have always taken a neutral position, but now their diplomacy is very strong. Unfortunately, the Muslim countries do not have public diplomacy on Palestine. So as a result of it, our story will only be told when there are problems, when there are crises, when there are intifada or anything. But the reports that come up is not good. So I hope that we can look at the best approaches, the bilateral, multilateral level, and multilateral at the United Nations and other international fora mechanism where the voices of the Palestinians can be heard better, not an emotive voice. I think it is important that it is not seen as an emotive voice, but a voice of reason, a voice of victims. And do not turn the Israelis to become the victim. The Israelis is not. And recognize the fact that Israel is not an ordinary state. It is a special state. Now a lot of Muslim countries are already enchanted by the success of Israel. So they want to have, I had 2 Israeli foreign ministers. One is David Levy, asking Malaysia to establish diplomatic relation. I said no. He said you're worse than the Arab countries. And he did. And then he gave me a dose. But the Levy is very nice because he is an Arab Jew from Morocco. And the other one, that was horrible. Mohd is the Deputy Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs. I met him in the meeting with fantastic security. I was sitting next to him in the same chair. Then he talked about Malaysia recognizing Israel. I said no. He said, we have got relationship with Indonesia. Because if you do not want formal relationship, you can have other relationship. I said no. We have now recognized the 2-state position. We have made our move. The Muslim country, OIC, all agreed to a 2-state solution. But what have you done in return? You have not moved anything. You are still at the same position. You are sitting like this. Then he told me, now I think I need to move from sitting in the same chair. I want to sit in front. So he sat in front of me. Dia duduk kat depan saya. So then I can see your demeanor and so on. I said, it's alright, Excellency, there is no problem. I also would like to see your demeanor. So I think there is a great suspicion. So our storyline that we set out must be on a continuous basis. I was talking to some of my friends about Balfour Declaration, about Sykes-Picot. Even people do not know very much about it. So it is time for us to make sure that the stories are told better. So minta maaf saya ambil masa sikit, tapi pasal orang ni semua dah cakap banyak that there was no necessity for my intervention as far as I'm concerned, but I hope my addition will enlighten on some aspect of what type of struggle that we have to choose in order for us to be successful and be recognized that we are the Palestinians are the victim, and you need to work together and get sympathy from other countries that are not Muslim countries. Thank you.
Terima kasih. Itu yang kita inginkan, satu pengalaman yang tak semua dapat. Seri pernah duduk dengan sebelah seorang Israeli minister, Israeli minister, and talking to him about the struggle. So saya nak buka sebab masa tak banyak, so saya nak buka kepada soalan kalau siapa yang ingin bertanya soalan kepada our panelist. Ada ke? Okey, insyaAllah di soalan belakang. Ada mikrofon ke untuk soalan? Tak tolong? Can we have someone bring the microphones?
Assalamualaikum. Saya cuma bagi macam pandangan sikit untuk yang Dr. Roslan kata asal usul daripada Jewish state ni, Judean state dia ada sentimen agama kan. Jadi dia tengah survey Haikal Sulaiman. Kita ada mendengar tentang Borobudur, candi di Indonesia. Dan mungkin kalau untuk UN, United Nation, boleh bagi satu penghormatan kepada Jewish supaya menziarahi candi Borobudur sebagai untuk clarify di mana Haikal Sulaiman itu, where the Haikal Sulaiman place stayed in Indonesia, not in Al-Quds. So
okay, interesting. So ada lagi soalan yang lain? Ada lagi soalan? Saya maklumkan di sini semua pelajar akademi Islam ada ambil subjek Islamic Jerusalem. Betul? Okay. Any question to the panelists? Otherwise, ada? Tak ada? Kalau tak, last.
Jadi saya nak tanya ke Tan Seri bagi rakyat Malaysia untuk memastikan berlakunya keadilan di Palestin ini, apakah nasihat kepada selain daripada yang sebut tadi spesifik gerakan-gerakan pro Palestin, apakah yang paling utama sekali yang patut dilakukan?
Itu saya fikir biar saya sebut berkenaan sebelum saya jawab Prof. Saya fikir dalam asal war or international relation or diplomasi, dia tak ada morality and ethics dalam western itu. Dan pada sekarang saya buat research dengan menulis berkenaan dengan Islam dan diplomasi. Ada orang tulis, saya pun nulis berminat berkenaan apa yang kita patut buat. Saya tengok ini my observation. Saya lihat bahawa kita banyak memandang isu Palestin sebagai isu agama. So orang-orang yang bukan Islam, dia 40% daripada rakyat Malaysia, tidak mempunyai pendekatan dan simpati yang sama. Saya fikir ini adalah isu kemanusiaan. Agama menjadi motivation untuk kita mencari keadilan. Pasal the issue of ihsan, keadilan mesti ada dalam manusia. So kita nak dapat, so you need to move away from purely agama punya tu. Dia orang ni sekarang there is a fear tau, ada ketakutan kenal agama Islam, apa pun kita buat dia kata jihad. And dia pun tak faham jihad, everything is jihad, they will be negative. So ini kita kena engage our non-Muslim ini dalam kita punya organisation ni supaya perkara-perkara ini menjadi satu perjuangan rakyat Malaysia. Bermakna there must be more information gathering macam inilah untuk mengadakan pertemuan, dialog, diskusi Di dalam dialog diskusi lebih banyak kita pendek dengan kita punya ucapan, biar orang tanya banyak. Jadi kita boleh tahu dia punya tu untuk kita merangka berkenaan kita punya tu. Saya minta maaf kerana kami masa sikit. Terima kasih.
Okey, kalau tak ada soalan, saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada semua panelis dan semua yang berkenan bersama kita hari ini. Terima kasih juga kepada Akademi Islam dan semua pelajar yang datang pada hari ini. Saya ucapkan terima kasih banyak. Semoga dapat sedikit manfaat daripada program pada hari ini dan teruskan semua untuk menyokong perjuangan dan pasti dapat keadilan untuk diri mereka. Di luar sana ada dalam satu perasaan ada satu meja yang kita letak petition untuk buat petition untuk boycott HP. Okey, siapa-siapa yang ingin dapatkan maklumat lanjut boleh ke meja tersebut dan kita minta sokonganlah kepada semua untuk bersama-sama dalam kempen ini. InsyaAllah. Itu saya serahkan semula kepada Prof. Roslan.
Terima kasih kepada terlibat. Sebelum kita bersurai, saya ingin menyampaikan tindak hati kepada panel kita dan juga kepada Mr. Sauta Bali. Jadi saya akan pesan.
Foto please.
Ambil gambar.
Foto please. Snap.
Gak ini Takashi masuklah.
Kamu masuk.
Saya buat saya gagal naik. Amerika dia terima kasih.
اسمع صور صاحب الجوال معك او جوالي اي جوال.
Satu lagi. Okay, thank you. Okay. Come, Malaysia.
Dia PA Hisham dulu. Oh ya. Okay, that's it. Here, come up here.
Everyone just sit.
Okay, good. See you.